The occurrence of widespread civic unrest following a major athletic event serves as a stark modern case study in the ongoing debate surrounding global migration and social cohesion. When large-scale property destruction, clashes with law enforcement, and public disorder erupt in a historic European capital, it inevitably forces a re-examination of the long-term impacts of rapid demographic shifts. For many observers, these scenes are not isolated incidents of sports-related rowdiness, but rather the predictable friction points of a broader systemic failure in integration policies. The structural stability of a nation relies heavily on shared civic values and cultural alignment, elements that become severely strained when immigration volumes outpace a society's capacity to assimilate newcomers. When thousands of individuals take to the streets, engaging in confrontational tactics against riot police and deploying improvised pyrotechnics, the immediate result is the breakdown of public safety. This volatility highlights a growing disconnect between traditional European legal frameworks and a growing demographic segment that appears increasingly alienated from, or hostile toward, the host nation's foundational identity. This phenomenon is no longer unique to a single urban center, as parallel patterns of civil unrest, localized lawlessness, and shifting cultural landscapes are increasingly visible across multiple Western European nations. From Scandinavia to the Mediterranean, major metropolitan areas are grappling with deep-seated social fragmentation that frequently manifests as targeted defiance against state authority. The recurring nature of these disruptions suggests that the challenges associated with large-scale humanitarian migration are systemic, rather than anomalous occurrences confined to specific geographic pockets. When public spaces and national monuments become the backdrop for ideological posturing and explicit rejection of the host country's heritage, the psychological impact on the native population is profound. The symbolic act of ascending historical statues to broadcast messages of dominance over a capital city represents a direct challenge to the historical continuity of the nation. Such displays generate deep resentment among citizens who view their cultural hospitality as being met with overt hostility and a refusal to adopt baseline standards of civic respect. The political response to these escalating tensions often exacerbates public frustration, particularly when leadership chooses to emphasize athletic achievements or superficial unity over pressing security concerns. Congratulating a local sports franchise while urban neighborhoods deal with arson and vandalism creates a glaring perception of elite detachment from everyday realities. A safe, functioning, and orderly society is a non-negotiable prerequisite for prosperity, one that cannot be substituted or smoothed over by triumphs in the sporting arena. A retrospective glance at European capitals from just a few decades ago reveals a stark contrast to the modern urban landscape, illustrating how rapidly the fabric of these communities has transformed. Scenes of peaceful public squares, low crime rates, and unburdened municipal infrastructure from the late 20th century are increasingly viewed as remnants of a bygone era. This shift leads critics to argue that the rapid introduction of diverse population groups has altered the baseline security and social trust that once characterized these historic spaces. The core of the argument centers on the premise that culture is not an abstract, disembodied concept, but a direct reflection of the values, traditions, and behavioral norms of the people who comprise a society. Different regions of the world have developed distinct frameworks for governance, civic duty, and public conduct over centuries of shared history. The belief that millions of individuals from vastly different socioeconomic and philosophical backgrounds can be seamlessly integrated into a Western framework via bureaucratic oversight or brief orientation programs is viewed by critics as highly idealistic. Decades of implementation across nearly 30 Western nations have provided a substantial data set regarding the outcomes of extensive humanitarian migration initiatives. Skeptics frequently challenge proponents of these policies to identify a single metric, whether economic vitality, housing availability, public safety, or overall social cohesion, that has demonstrably improved as a direct consequence of these large-scale demographic adjustments. Instead, data reflecting strained social safety nets and heightened cultural polarization suggest that the experiment has yielded highly problematic results. For observers analyzing these international trends from abroad, The current trajectory of Western Europe serves as an urgent cautionary tale regarding the enforcement of domestic border security and immigration quotas. The preservation of national stability requires a proactive approach to border management, strict enforcement of existing legal channels, and a willingness to curb programs that facilitate unregulated entry. Proponents of strict border policies argue that failing to maintain these safeguards risks duplicating the exact patterns of fragmentation and municipal distress currently visible across the Atlantic. Ultimately, the debate over migration, cultural compatibility, and national identity will continue to shape the political landscape of the Western world for generations to come. The scenes of unrest in historic capitals underscore the high stakes involved in these policy decisions, serving as a vivid reminder that the choices made regarding citizenship and borders have permanent consequences. Maintaining a cohesive, law-abiding society requires a deliberate commitment to shared values, a standard that becomes increasingly difficult to uphold when the rule of law is openly compromised in the streets.